Hello, my name is Joe, and these are my stories that I want to tell you. Today, I'm going shopping, and then I plan to stop by the gym. I recently bought a motorcycle, so I ride it everywhere. Let me begin my story. Sit back and relax. It's going to be interesting. I know this story firsthand. And no, it's not about me. I was, let's say, in the audience for this performance. But I was sitting close, very close to the stage. It's raining again. It's been raining too often lately. Once upon a time, there was a guy, let's call him Maximum. He was an ordinary guy, just like you and me. He had a good head on his shoulders and his hands in the right places. And he had Lena, the love of his life, as he thought at the time. They had been together since school, doing everything together. They got married as soon as they got on their feet, and he got on his feet quickly. He had a knack for business, a nose for money. He started small, logistics, freight transportation. First one truck, then a second, then a whole fleet. He worked like a dog, while Lena made their home cozy. The perfect picture, right? He was the breadwinner, she was the homemaker. They lived soul to soul for 10 years. They built a business from scratch and bought a luxurious apartment in the center. Everything they dreamed of. And they had a friend, Vadim. He and Max had been buddies since college. At first, Vadim also tried to start something of his own, but it didn't work out. Max, a kind soul, took him into his company as his deputy. He trusted him with everything, as if he were his own brother. Finances, contracts, key clients, everything was in Vadim's hands. Max trusted him like a brother. Do you understand? Not as a partner, but as a brother. That was his first fatal mistake. He began to notice strange things. Lena became cold, always on her phone. Vadim avoided his gaze at meetings, but Max pushed the bad thoughts away. Tired, overwhelmed, paranoid. Who among us hasn't been there? And then everything collapsed in one day. In the morning, the police burst into his office. Masks, everything like in the movies. His head on the floor, handcuffs, the charges, large-scale fraud, tax evasion of some astronomical amount. While he was sitting in temporary detention, trying to understand what the hell was going on, the puzzle began to come together. His lawyer, hired by old friends, gathered information bit by bit. It turned out that Vadim had been siphoning money out of the company for several months through shell companies. He created fake debts and forged Max's signature on documents. And Lena knew about it. What's more, she was his accomplice. While Max was working hard, these two were having an affair behind his back. And not just an affair. They had a plan. A cold, cynical plan. Vadim needed a business. Lena needed a beautiful life without a husband who was always tired from work. They leaked information to the security forces, nicely packaged with falsified documents. All fingers pointed to Max. He was the founder. He was the CEO. He was the one to blame. "Friends, it's so good that I have a motorcycle. Can you do the same with cars?" The trial was quick. Testimony from his beloved wife, his best friend, fake documents. Max got 8 years, maximum security. In his final statement, he looked at them, at Lena and Vadim. They were sitting next to each other, and Lena didn't even look up at him. And Vadim looked at him with such an icy smirk that Max realized it wasn't just business. It was something personal. And here, guys, a completely different story begins. Not about love and betrayal, but about hatred. Pure, distilled hatred that had warmed him all these 8 years. Prison is a university. Only they don't teach mathematics there. Max, who was an ordinary businessman, found himself in a world where different laws apply. At first it was hard, of course, they broke him. But he survived. He didn't become a lackey. He didn't sell out. He listened, memorized, and made connections. Strangely enough, there are a lot of smart people in prison. Former lawyers, economists, security officials who crossed paths with the wrong people somewhere. He shared his story with them, and they shared their experience. One former investigator taught him how to find weak spots in any case and how to work with information. Another, who was serving time for corporate raiding, revealed to him all the shady schemes used to take over businesses. A third, a former thief-in-law of the old school, taught him the most important thing: patience. Revenge is a dish that is not just served cold, he told Max. It must be cooked for so long that it becomes ice cold. Max was released early after 6 years for good behavior. No one was there to meet him when he got out. The apartment was sold. The business, or rather what was left of it, was transferred to Vadim and flourished under a new name. Lena and Vadim lived together, posting about their happy life on social media. They thought he was broken, that he was a broken, unwanted convict. They were very, very wrong. Max disappeared. He vanished from the radar for a whole year. And then it began. His revenge was not swift and bloody. Number. It was slow, sophisticated, and psychologically calculated. He acted like a spider spinning a web. First, he attacked the reputation of their new business. Through his prison acquaintances, he organized a series of smear campaigns. Fake reviews from dissatisfied customers flooded the internet, along with articles on dubious websites about poor service and the company's ties to crime. These were small bites, but they were constant. Vadim initially dismissed it, but customers began to leave. Then Max turned his attention to their personal lives. He hired people to follow their every move. He knew everything: where they went, who they talked to, what they feared. Lena was terrified of old age and oblivion. Max created several fake accounts, from which messages began to arrive for her. Compliments about her fading beauty. Hints that Vadim was eyeing young secretaries. Paranoia began to gnaw at her from within. It was more difficult with Vadim. He was cynical and calculating. Therefore, the blow was struck where it hurt the most: his ego and his money. Max, using his new connections and knowledge, began to terrorize his business. in a grown-up way. Sudden Pro. It was more difficult with Vadim. He was cynical and calculating, so the blow was struck where it hurt most: his ego and his money. Max, using his new connections and knowledge, began to terrorize his business in a grown-up way. Sudden inspections from all possible authorities: fire department, tax office, sanitary and epidemiological station. The tips were anonymous and so well written that it was impossible not to respond to them. The company's work was practically paralyzed. But that was just the beginning. Max saved the main blow for last. Through frontmen, he approached one of Vadim's key creditors. Remember those prison lectures on raiding? Max pulled off a brilliant scheme. He essentially bought out Vadim's company's debts, but did so through a chain of several firms so that his trail could not be traced. And then one wonderful day, when Vadim was sure he had dealt with all his problems, all his accounts were simply frozen, and he was presented with a demand for immediate repayment of the entire debt. Of course, there was no money in the accounts. It had been eaten up by endless audits, lost customers, and bribes. The company was on the verge of bankruptcy. Vadim paced like a caged animal. He started drinking. Lena, tormented by paranoia and seeing her beautiful life falling apart, made a huge scene. In the heat of the argument, Vadim hit her. And that was exactly what Max was waiting for. He knew that Vadim had always been quick-tempered, and he knew that the apartment was under surveillance. A recording of the argument and the beating was immediately sent anonymously to the police. The climax came a week later. Vadim, who had completely lost his mind, tried to withdraw the remaining assets, but it was too late. Max, as the main creditor, initiated bankruptcy proceedings and, in effect, took over the remains of the business for pennies. That same evening, he called Vadim from a new number. "Did you find out?" Max asked. Heavy breathing could be heard on the line. "I just wanted to say thank you. You and Lena gave me 8 years to think everything through." That was more than enough. Vadim shouted something in response, threatening him. But Max had already hung up. What happened to them after that? Vadim drank himself to death and, they say, now works as a security guard at a construction site. Lena left him after the beating. She tried to return to her hometown, but rumors that accidentally reached there made her life unbearable. She was last seen working as a cashier in a supermarket. She had aged considerably. And Max resurrected his old business from the ashes. He became tougher, more cynical, trusting no one. But he's back on top. Sometimes we run into each other. He never talks about that story. But sometimes I see that same icy gleam in his eyes that must have helped him survive. So, guys, when you feel like you've been betrayed and your life is over, remember, sometimes it's just the beginning. The beginning of a completely different, much more terrifying story.